The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, Thursdays. Here it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. As we'll get our starting five shout out here on the Hail Varsity stream. Hope you're doing okay. Chance to make some of your fall plans with kickoff times announced. We'll get there. We'll hear from Brandon Vogel from Counter Read, counterread.com. Really good write-up from Vogue's, his reaction to some of the anonymous comments, not just recently from Athlon, but over the years on Nebraska. And we'll have some takes here on Nebraska's kickoff times, just what it means for the Big Red. We'll turn our attention to Stillwater, get you ready for Nebraska. Really good story by Mitch Sherman on some of the parallels with Will Bolt's teams, the Dave Van Horn era, and this Nebraska baseball team. So we'll talk with Vogues in hour two. Part of the Nebraska baseball broadcast is David Gustafson, former partner here at Hail Varsity. We'll talk with Gus as he's getting on the road down to Stillwater with some Husker Sports Network action. Gary Barnett will check in with Barney, some thoughts on the world of college football. And Danny Burke, Pride of Chicago, Burke's Best Bets, Burke's Beat. We'll get Danny's take on some NBA and some Major League Baseball. Numbers to get in at 489-1240. 489-1240. Can dial up 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com and find us on Twitter at Herbalessence, for Elijah at Schmidt_radio. For me, Chris Schmidt. And again, like and subscribe with the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Can also stream on the radio Twitter at H Varsity Radio. Elijah, you've been running, man. It's pretty cool to see this time of year baseball having success if you're a Nebraska fan, and the kickoff times are pretty cool. We'll also jump into what the SEC's already pushing, and no doubt the Big Ten will do it as well. You want as many of your teams represented in this new 12-team playoff, and the old debate, record versus strength of schedule. Do you want a 12-1 versus a 9-3? And we can dive headfirst into that.
Can I also quickly say, so people don't change the radio station or leave the stream should you so choose, I know our home station, KFOR, is a news talk hybrid along with sports. So quickly, Donald Trump found guilty of all 34 counts. We have no further things to say on that. But if you were wondering, if you're tuning into your radio station to catch a verdict, and you're like, man, what are these dudes talking about sports on KFOR or wherever you're listening? Let's just throw that out there. So if you'd like to get more coverage, you can find that online or wherever you like to get your coverage. But Trump found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying his business records. I'm sure that is going to be in the news tonight. I don't think we have anything more to say on it today.
That was pretty quick turnaround.
That was.
That's what I will say on that, and you'll get some appeals. Likely.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to get a slew of appeals from the Don. 489-1240, numbers to get in. So, Elijah, the schedule, right? The schedule is out, and it's pretty unique for Nebraska. And what is happening right now, and you had Bruce Feldman talk about Nebraska. You have a recent poll put out by The Athletic as well from a dark horse category. Nebraska, and Nebraska fans love to support Nebraska. But when you talk to folks around the national college football scene, Nebraska's schedule is fun. It's got some landmark ball games on it, but it's also doable, especially how Nebraska starts. We've talked in depth about the first 7. We've talked in depth about Nebraska's ability to get momentum, to get downhill. Think of it as downhill running versus going downhill early. We got to make that distinction, that context. But Nebraska's got a chance to ramp up and really sizzle out of the gate. It's really kind of up to them, and Coach Rule knows that. The Chasing 3 title for the video documentary is just that. It is about tight ball games. It is about winning in those key moments. And can Nebraska reverse course from what they have been beyond Matt Rule? And you've got a bunch of guys, a bunch of experience, a bunch of talent, and I think they're set up for a lot of success, but they've got to handle it from a fundamental standpoint. They got to go out and make some plays. They're all gearing towards doing that. So when we talk about the football schedule and Nebraska, how things start out, listen, you're going to be on prime time a lot. It feels honestly kind of like old times. Nebraska, for much of the 90s, despite the TV setup not being as widespread where everybody's on TV now, that's what was really unique about Nebraska football. In a lot of the 1980s, Nebraska was on TV as much or more than most of the programs. And even into the 1990s, when Notre Dame had their own network with NBC, Nebraska was still a feature for college football. They were great. They were dominant. They were winning. They were blowing people out. They were a sight to see how they dismantled teams. Nebraska earned all of that because of how well they played and how well they performed in big games. But it was a ramp up to do that. You were the epitome of consistency, where you're winning 9, 10, 11 ball games for decades at a time. How did you perform in the biggest of stages? It didn't always go your way, but it was usually a pretty good fight. Nebraska recently has not done well in prime time. I think back to last year, I think the first half of the Colorado game, you were like, okay, and even into that midway part of the third quarter, it's a 13-7 ball game where the eyes of college football are on you, and then it unraveled. You've seen some unraveling, and we can just point to the Wisconsin games where Nebraska's leading or it's tied or it's tight, and then Wisconsin runs for 1,000 on you, okay? You've seen blow-ups in prime time the last 10 years plus. You've also seen some good moments. Mentioned the Colorado game. Miami was a primetime game a whole decade ago. 9 years ago, you knock off a playoff team in Michigan State. So Nebraska's had their moments. You can even go back to 2022, where you keep Iowa out of the Big Ten championship game, a 9-win Iowa team, and you limp in as a 3-8 football squad, and you play your backside off, and you win in Iowa City, right, with Mickey on the sideline. So that was a primetime moment for Nebraska. There is a lot of hype. There's a lot of belief, and Nebraska's brand and eyeballs speak for themselves despite the football record. They've got a great opportunity. They've got to deliver. They've got to deliver without putting way too much pressure on a year two. You've got that opportunity. You are being given prime time against Colorado at night. You're being given prime time against Iowa on Black Friday. Part of that's the Chiefs. Let's not kid ourselves.
I think most of it.
I think most of it is. So you got Minnesota, Wisconsin at 11 a.m. Then you have Nebraska, Iowa at night. I love that. I love that venue. I love that setting. And it is a game of consequence. So I love those opportunities. Nebraska needs to be able to step up and perform in those moments. You've got a coach, you've got a quarterback, you've got a defense, you have some depth, you're a dark horse squad. Go play, go perform, and show that you belong. So it isn't buyer's remorse or trepidation the next time Nebraska is being talked about by the TV folks, whether or not to pick Nebraska as a primetime dog.
Well, I mean, I was just about to get into that. Is what do these TV partners, the TV networks, think of what Nebraska can be this year in year two under Matt Rule with Dylan Ryle at quarterback? Well, they think
they'll be interesting.
They'll think highly of him enough that 3 out of your first 4 games, not to mention 3 consecutive games, are going to be in primetime. I know that one of those Northern Iowa is going to be on BTN, but
I'll take it.
I'll take it as well.
And I know the fan base will take it.
I'll take it. I mean, we love primetime games.
A fall night under the lights.
Hey, I'd much rather have a 6:30 or 7 p.m. kick in early September whenever you still have a chance for 90-degree days. Yeah, give me that cool evening to get into the stadium and give me all day to hydrate myself in that heat. It's a louder venue, and with the hype that there could be with Dylan Raiola, those 3 straight primetime games, I think it's a calculated move by the TV networks, understanding, there's a good likelihood Nebraska could have more juice behind them by the end of those first 4 games than they've had in a long, long time.
Well,
put them all in primetime, get it in front of the home fans, build some juice, and give yourself as a TV network some reason for people to tune into Nebraska for some of those real big matchups late in the season. You do that by putting them in primetime and building some hype around a team. If there's a team that you can build hype around to be a dark horse in the Big Ten, I think we're seeing today is that some of these TV networks think it could be Nebraska.
Well, and how about the fact that it's not a night game, but it's a 2:30 kick for Fox? A lot of eyeballs in college football will be on the unveiling of Dylan Raiola. Yeah. And this will go a long ways to the next time, right? All right, so it's not a night game, but you're going to be prime time, that magical moment, that stage. You're going to have that stage to start the year, and then you transition into a night ball game against the Buffs. You have Illinois on Friday night, again, national audience with Fox. And then how do you navigate the rest of the season? We don't know about Indiana. We know 11 o'clock is Purdue. We don't know what network's carrying that. We also don't know where Wisconsin will be slated, but it really will depend as to what's your record and are you in this race for the Big Ten? Are you in this race for Indy? Same with USC. I mean, your game, listen to what you got. You've got the Buffs prime time. You've got Iowa prime time. You could be undefeated or a one-loss squad against Ohio State. Is that thing a night game? Is that thing a prime time? It went from Nebraska being on ABC or prime time against Ohio State to being exiled during the Riley era to beatdowns on BTN. Think about that. Ohio State, Nebraska being a 3rd or 4th choice on a weekend by BTN properties on BTN versus an ABC or a Fox or a CBS or whatever the partnership was.
And that's what I'm saying with reading between the lines with how these TV networks are scheduling Nebraska's early season games in primetime or on national television or both. It reads to me as TV networks trying to build a little bit of hype, seeing what Nebraska's schedule is and seeing what they could be by the time some of these helmet games come around. USC, Ohio State, Iowa in primetime. I know that's already been announced, but it's a chance early in the season for them to say, you know what, we think this team can be pretty good. We're believers in Matt Rule. We're believers in Dylan Raiola. We're believers in what the national media are saying about this Nebraska team potentially breaking out this year. That's what I'm reading into this announcement today. It's I think they're trying to set themselves up for success later in the season when Nebraska does get those helmet matchups. So it's not, let's tune on Ohio State's playing. You say, Ohio State's playing Dylan Raiola, Matt Rule in Nebraska. Let's go see what's going to happen there. A one-loss or an undefeated Nebraska team. We've seen them a couple times this year. They impressed us against Colorado. They impressed us against UTEP on Friday night against Illinois. That's what I think the TV networks are doing here is they're trying to set themselves up for success whenever those big-time matchups come later in the year so that you get the eyes of college football on Nebraska when they play Ohio State or USC or name your helmet matchup late in the season. That's how I'm reading into this in a bigger picture sense, but the big reaction today is also just, man, it's going to be great to get 3 straight primetime games in Lincoln.
But it's going to be great, ... but deliver.
Yes.
But deliver. Think about it, man. You've got a potential phenom that's going to be around the college football world in Raiola. You have a guy that's super likable and has done miracle jobs at previous stops in Matt Rule. It's a good story. It's a good story about an old brand. It's a wonderful comeback story for Nebraska football. But you gotta write it. It can write itself, but you got to get in front of the typewriter and do the work. Let's get shout-outs real quick. Go ahead.
Can I quickly say, whenever you talk about delivering, I kind of think back to Colorado last year, because Colorado was set up in much the same way I think Nebraska set up this year with national television opportunities, primetime matchups.
Buzz.
A couple of big noon kickoffs to start the year. Primetime, that game with Colorado State, national television against ABC, national television against USC. like they set Colorado up for that kind of buzz that maybe not Nebraska's going to get, because I don't think Nebraska is as big on talking off the field
not
as Colorado
as flamboyant.
is. Not as flamboyant, but think about the way national television set up Colorado last year. That's the type of story Nebraska could potentially set themselves up for if you deliver. Colorado delivered early in the season. They got some of that hype. They didn't deliver as the year went on. People cared about Colorado all year long nonetheless. That's the kind of setup I think these TV networks are giving Nebraska. Maybe not the exact same, but similar in that let's get the eyes of college football on Nebraska early and show people what this team could be.
Well, and don't kid yourself. You can take a lesson out of the Buffs last season, right, with hope and hype, and it's going great early. How do you finish? It's not how you start. NU Grandpa is in first. Tuck is here. Justin checks in. Jeff is here. Also, Patrick, a Montana Husker fan, says what's up. William is in, but good to have him. William, appreciate you. And he is in Austin, Texas. Can't stay for all of the live show, but do love the pod. William, we love you for checking us out. Eric is in. Says, let's have a Thursday, lads. KG is here. Love hearing from KG. Mr. Snitley, Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. The other Dave. Mark Lund, good to have you. When's SC going to happen? It's a great question.
Big Red After Dark. That's what I'm saying.
It'll be all right. Brandon Vogel on the way with Cal to Read here on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Schedule, release, reaction, strength of schedule, or record. Where do you lean? We know where the SEC is coming from, and no doubt the Big Ten, as many helmet games as you're going to see, will try and position some of their big-time properties. So we're going to get Brandon Vogel in, hopefully here in a moment, get Vogues' take on things. Really good column from Vogues on really where Nebraska's been from these anonymous coaches. Gary Barnett coming up here at 5:05, and we'll spend some time with David Gustafson, part of the Nebraska Radio Network. He is on his way to Stillwater. Got an email in, Chris at hailvarsity.com. Justin emails in asking a question. Did Jabba send out Matt Holliday's address? I refuse to pay up for a bleep hotel. He said, I'll bring the beer.
Just look for the biggest house in Stillwater, and it's probably that one.
Over Gundy?
How much money Matt Holliday made in his career?
That's
I think
fair.
it's more than Gundy.
Well,
I'm
that's true.
I'm pretty sure Matt Holliday.
What if Gundy was, and I don't know that they were on great terms before old T. Boone passed, but Gundy was pretty hot coach for a while.
I am almost,
and he's still awesome.
I'm almost positive, if I remember correctly, that Matt Holliday has a personal baseball diamond in his backyard.
Because he can.
Well, and that's where his kids grew up playing baseball.
I like it. We'll see if he's got a wiffle ball in his backyard. Brandon Vogel, counterread, counterread.com. Does Matt Holliday have the biggest house in Stillwater, Vogues, over Gundy? Yes or no? Where would you lean?
Yes, I would lean yes. I think that's accurate.
Okay. That is accurate. Vogues, I love the column today with Counter Read on the anonymous coaches. We'll get there in a minute. Your take on the schedule release, on just the opportunity Nebraska has in front of them to showcase. I mean, it is, Matt Rule talks a lot about earning it, and he will continue to enforce that part of things, I have no doubt. But Nebraska is getting some real nice treatment from a showcase standpoint.
Yeah, they absolutely are. So, I mean, let's start here with like all of these preseason rankings. They're based on like a set of knowns, which are kind of like, how has this program been in the past 3, 4, 5 years, however long they want to look back? How many people do they return? You got to kind of figure the transfer portal into that. And then how well have they recruited? And that's kind of what you can pencil in terms of formulas and data. And then you look at the schedule and you compare it against the teams on the schedule. And we can look at this and be like, if Nebraska is, as good as all those other factors would indicate that they are, which has not been the case at Nebraska for a long time. So it's a pretty big if. Well, the start of the schedule looks pretty favorable. They'll be favored in their first 4 games. I think using a method that I use for kind of determining point spreads based on a power ranking, and against the schedule, like they're at like 5.8 wins over their first 8 games. So round that up to 6 at the end of October, essentially. If you're 6-2 at the end of October, or 4-0 even at the end of September, having played what we now know are going to be 3 primetime games in your first 4, like you're going to be kind of, I don't know, like Colorado is always going to be talked about no matter what it does. But if Nebraska's 4-0 after September, people are going to be talking about it. And I'm not penciling that in, much less penning that in. But the opportunity is there. And the schedule release today, like seeing when those games are going to happen, I think only accelerates that a little bit.
Do you think that today could be the TV networks penciling in a hot start for Nebraska, saying we're going to put Nebraska in prime time, we're going to put them on national television, in hopes that if they do that, they can set themselves up for success later in the season once the real helmet matchups start happening, and say, hey, if we've got Nebraska out there and exposed during a hot start, we're going to be able to draw more eyes in for a USC, an Ohio State, UCLA. That's kind of my read on today is it's not them guaranteeing Nebraska's going to be off to a hot start, but it's them kind of betting on it and saying, if this does in fact happen, we give ourselves a better chance of bringing in some eyes and bringing in some money later in the season.
Maybe a tiny bit. I mean, when you look at this, you also got to weigh it against, like, and I haven't looked at, what the week 3 schedule in college football is lately. It was a bit of like the biggest surprise here was probably to get Northern Iowa on in a night slot, even if it's on BTN. So I think, like, to your point, Elijah, that game says a little something like, well, we know Nebraska draws, like we know about the passionate fan base, and we'll see what happens, and like we'll be happy if later on, Nebraska is really, really in the hunt for something as we get a few weeks down the road. So I think there's part of that. There's just so many moving pieces that I'm hesitant to say, like off the top of it, like they're, anticipating or maybe even betting on a fast start for Nebraska. That said, like, and we've seen it in recent weeks, like Nebraska's kind of become a little bit buzzy now from a national perspective, which is fair enough. There are a lot of reasons for that. And you can look at the schedule and be like, yeah, you get all those first four games at home. That's a pretty big advantage, and probably even a bigger advantage playing them at night.
Folks, I've got the question of performance here. Buffs, prime time, Iowa, prime time. Love that. We're going to drag you to Iowa City to have a cocktail at midnight. USC and Ohio State in some form, doesn't matter record. You've got three big dog networks that'll put that one of those networks will have USC, Nebraska, Ohio State, Nebraska. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is, plus you already have Illinois, right? Friday and all, but it's still 2 on Big Fox. What's your record need to be with a freshman quarterback, presumably in year 2, as a buzz team? At the end of the day, do you need to be right at 500? Do you need to be 2-3 in those games? Or excuse me, 2-2. I'm not going to put Illinois in that category from a stature standpoint. But if you go 2-2 or 1-3, but damn, they're all competitive. Is that okay too? I mean, let's examine that before we get into the anonymous stuff.
Yeah. So we're talking about Colorado,
USC, Iowa, Ohio State.
Iowa.
Because those are we know that 2 are prime time. We can safely assume that a third of the 4 will be a prime time as well.
Ohio State's right now, you chalk that up as a loss. Like, I mean, if I had to pick today, Ohio State's my pick to win the national championship. Like, they're loaded. The thought of having Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator and having him being excited about, like, I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. I can just, like,
Chip's
draw plays.
Chip's happy again.
Is terrifying, frankly, if you're a fan of another team in the Big Ten. So that's one. It's tough because Colorado, like, you could kind of convince me of the Buffs landing anywhere at this point, but Nebraska will be a favorite. There's actually a line out on that game now. They're currently a favorite. I don't know if it's much more than home field advantage last time I looked, but given the Huskers' recent history with Colorado, you gotta hope the Huskers win that, but kind of a toss-up. USC is another team that I could see being, having 2 losses at the time they go into that Nebraska game, or if they had 4. Like, neither of those results would surprise me. And then Iowa, like, they're just as kind of steady as they come and tough to beat. So I think going 2-2 in those 4 would be pretty good, regardless of, like, the time slot, which is kind of what we're talking about here, and is important in its own way. Like, if you go 2-2 against those 4 teams, Nebraska, I bet, is pretty close to having the season that Husker fans hope they could have, and that some of the metrics point us in the direction of them being able to have.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Vogues with counterread.com. Check out his work there. And Brandon, before we get you out, let's quickly flip gears here to baseball and discuss the Stillwater Regional. Your thoughts on what Nebraska faces in a team that was in the College World Series in Florida, a team in Oklahoma State that loves crushing home runs at their home stadium. Doesn't necessarily seem like the most favorable draw for Nebraska, but that being said, with as steady as Nebraska's pitching has gotten over the last couple weeks of the season, that Big Ten tournament especially, it feels like they're playing their best baseball.
Yeah, it does. Can't say enough about the run that they went on in the Big Ten tournament, particularly after how it started. So I think, there's some unknowable upside here of, like, hey, maybe this team is just kind of hitting it at exactly the right time. Florida, I think they were a game above 500 overall, but the SEC always it's the best baseball conference year in and year out, but I feel like it was particularly good this year. So don't go by that Florida record. And, we've seen Nebraska in the Stillwater Regional, fairly often. And Oklahoma State is tough to beat there if Nebraska gets the opportunity to try and do that. So it's, I think it's fair to characterize it as a tough draw. Nebraska is seated ahead of Florida, but again, SEC was a nightmare this year, I think, for a lot of teams. So we'll see, but they're playing really well. If they can kind of carry the momentum, I think they found in Omaha in particular, they've got a shot. They absolutely do.
Vogues, I'm going to keep you for a couple of minutes on the other side. If we can do a little overtime, I want to talk to you about your column on the predictive magazines that are out, specifically the Athlon and Anonymous Coaches. We spent a little time on it yesterday. We love it. We really like your column on it. And also Athlon, make that the Athletic, not only the Bruce Feldman take on Cowherd yesterday, as he's saying, look, Nebraska's a dark horse team to get to Indy, to go along with this TV schedule that Nebraska's going to be a part of. But they've been voted as the dark horse team in the Big Ten, 21.4%. We need some thoughts from you on the other side. So stay tuned. More Brandon Vogel from Counter Read. Thursday edition, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Some overtime with Brandon Vogel, Counterread, counterread.com. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. As Brandon Vogel back with us here. Vogues, your column today on Counter Read details the preview magazines that are out. And what's your reaction to the Nebraska gossip, the anonymous coach weighing in on the Big Red? And it's a different take than past seasons, from the all off the bus team to they're going to screw it up themselves somehow team to what the hell's their identity or their culture to, man, this Matt Rule and this quarterback could be pretty good.
Yeah, so this is always one of my favorite mile markers of the off season. I don't know how much longer it is for the college football world, but hopefully it continues because I love it. And as I kind of wrote at counterread.com today, this is a free post, so anybody who's not subscribed can head over there and you can subscribe for free and read this one. It was pretty similar to what some Big Ten coaches, we don't know who, we're saying about Nebraska in 2019 for the most part. This year's, there was the stuff I think you expected to see of, hey, this team could break through. It's just a matter of like how big of a step are they going to take. I think that's kind of the general tenor on Nebraska in year 2 under Matt Rule. There's a note about Dylan Raiola being like, look, they might be not naming a starter, but like he's their best guy, which I think a lot of people agree with. The one that stood out to me was a mention of the defensive line. And I kind of go into this in the column about why that's the case. You bring back, three guys who in Butler, Hutmacher, and Ty Robinson, who have the potential to be like top third of an 18-team Big Ten. I think just those three alone. But I think the real question with D-line is, have they improved the depth behind them? And I think Nebraska has a good chance to have done that too. So that's the one I kind of chose to highlight. But we'll see. I'll say this: that the tone of the anonymous coach quotes for Nebraska in 2019 changed drastically in 2020.
All bus team.
You're still cautious of that, I guess.
Yeah, that all bus team quote I think will live in my head for forever. Partly because that's
got to be Fleck.
Yeah, it's possible. But
because he sits down with us every year at Big Ten Media Days and he's like, dude, they look great in warm-ups. I mean, Fleck's just not wearing socks and saying, man, they're big dudes.
But the problem was like, you read it and you went, whichever coach said that isn't necessarily wrong.
Oh, they look great. They just fumbled and threw too many picks.
Husker fans all said, like, man, this team looks like it should win more than 3 games. And then they would shoot themselves in the foot every single year. That was the worst part about that.
Ammo.
Well, I mean, and that's part of, to go back to what we talked about in the first segment, like that's part of why Nebraska hasn't hit, I think, a lot of these preseason projections, things we're talking about this time of year every year. It's like, because you look at the recruiting level and you're like, well, yeah, this is probably by the recruiting rankings, whatever weight you put in those, like this is the most talented team in the division, and it just never looked that way. So,
Brandon, before we get you out here, I want to get your thoughts. Schmitty, I kind of asked the question to him during the break. There is the consideration among the NCAA of allowing corporate sponsors in college football, both on the jersey and on the field. Any nominations for who Nebraska should contact first, or who should contact Nebraska first for a corporate sponsorship? What business do you think would best fit on a Husker uniform or on Tom Osborne Field?
It's sweet and tangy end zone. Come on.
I'm fairly traditional, and this would be a basic answer, but for me, it's always going to be Runza. Like that's kind of the. It's as a person who's lived outside of Nebraska for quite a while, it's kind of the one that's always like, oh yeah, you go to Nebraska, you can get this. Like you may like it, you may not. I do like it, but it's kind of a singular experience. So that would be the one which, like, I understand it's kind of a reality, and I'd get used to it. Like I don't welcome the addition of corporate sponsors, particularly to uniforms. Field bothers me less. But if it were to come, let it be Runza first.
There's been some hilarious suggestions in the stream here. May I add one more?
Justin Patrick say Kool-Aid. Eat beef said Dr. John's.
I'll let that one lie. My recommendation here, a lot's been made in the past, decade of the aging fan base of Nebraska, the aging donor base of Nebraska. If you're trying to market to those people, how about Preparation H?
It's just not a good tie with football.
Well, what are you doing? You're sitting watching a game, probably in discomfort.
And you're in the section that got passed over for renovation, so you have splinters. I get it. Vogues, tell us about Counter Read, how folks can get signed up, what you and Aaron Sorensen do.
Yeah, Counter Read is a twice-weekly newsletter on Substack for myself and Aaron Sorensen, where I get to write about things that I care about a lot and others may not, like anonymous coach quotes. But I always try to go a little deeper on more than just the surface level of that. And like I said, I've got all these magazines on these shelves if you're watching on the stream behind me, so it was very easy for me to go back and see, like, man, what were we talking about in 2019? So it's that sort of stuff, particularly in the off season and the long summer. We've got a lot of good stuff planned over the next couple of months, which become June and half of July are kind of the slowest months for pure football talk, but I've always viewed it as kind of a time to set yourself apart, because it's just more time to dig into stuff, and digging into stuff is what I like to do. So if you're interested in that, check out Counter Read.
Love it. Brandon Vogel, Aaron Sorensen, Counterread, counterread.com. Imagine on Tom Osborne Field there being a gambling logo.
Oh, that wouldn't fly. Brandon, along with the aging audience, suggests Viagra.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are just certain revenue streams that don't blanket it spending money.
Gambling's the big one.
Vogues, appreciate you much, man. We'll talk Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
There he is, Brandon Vogel, with us here on Hail Varsity Radio.
We also have a suggestion in that with recent news, Colorado should get a bankruptcy lawyer.
Sure.
On the field.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to talk to Barney about that. I'm more interested in the anonymous stuff and his take. But as we wind down, we'll get to some baseball next segment, 489-1240. Emails, chris@hailvarsity.com. So Gary Barnett in the second hour, David Gustafson, part of the Husker baseball crew. And then Danny Burke will get back into gambling with these dark horse thoughts from our friends at The Athletic. So they look at Nebraska. For sure the votes lead the way. It's Nebraska as the team in the Big Ten that could be a dark horse.
And for reference, this is from the general public voting on this?
Yeah,
yes?
they are also intrigued by Nebraska. It's Nebraska, it's Iowa, it's Wisconsin, then it's USC. I think your top four are your top four, but they like the optimism in Lincoln with Coach Rule, with Raiola, and they like the schedule. That's it. They say the Huskers will not be a good team, but none of these teams will challenge the top four. However, the Huskers in year two of a rebuild have a good schedule, and there's some talent there. So that's their reasoning. We'll wind down hour one with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour. You always get the podcast with Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Download there. Like, subscribe, and give us some feedback. Tell us what you think, good, bad, or ugly. Love the response. Hail Varsity Twitter at HVarsity Radio, and can watch the show if that's easier for you on Twitter or YouTube. Hail Varsity YouTube, like and subscribe there. And at HVarsity Radio, our friends at AM 590, Omaha's ESPN. Also can catch the show on their Twitter handle, the Facebook app, and, of course, Facebook for KFOR, Facebook and Twitter. Central Nebraska's Superstation, Kearney Hastings, Grand Island is where you hear us, as well as News Talk 900 in Columbus. We're huddling up about tomorrow with possibly some inclement weather in Stillwater and some inclement weather in our neck of the woods. So we may have to audible to Sports Bar, Elijah.
Well, so the game actually gets in.
I know, right?
That would be a disaster for us. I mean, what the hell do we talk about tomorrow? I'm kidding.
No, we'll be fine.
I'm kidding.
We'll absolutely be fine. Gary Barnett in 10 minutes.
We'll just go for 2 hours on the topic of what company should sponsor Nebraska's on-field.
No,
or
it's
jersey
funny.
logo.
I mean, I think you've got your great folks at Sand Hills Global. You've got your great folks at KHIH, right? Seed. You got your great folks, of course, with John Deere and Dorothy Lynch and Fairbury. And, I mean, just go down the list of folks and Kool-Aid, for sure. It's a Nebraska company.
We had Jim chime in on the phone, say Berkshire Hathaway.
Sure. Get Uncle Warren, not only get him his own setup. I mean, Warren could be your 2.0, T-Boone Pickens.
Well, what do you think of the idea?
Business school loves him, and he loves a business school.
What do you think of the idea of on-field or on-jersey sponsorships as a whole? Love it, hate it, don't care?
Give me one.
Give me the jersey.
Give me one. I'm okay with one. I don't need it to look. I mean, NASCAR Eric's one of our favorites, but your jersey can't look like a NASCAR suit.
See, I look at the way the NBA does it.
Yeah, they have one that looks good.
One small patch that tends to match the colorway of the jersey. That's important to me.
You've got your patch, you've got your Nike or Adidas, and then somewhere else you can fit a corporate sponsor. You can do the end zone sponsor, and away you go.
Like
you can do your stadium naming.
To me, just make sure don't change Memorial Stadium.
No, it's Memorial Stadium. It's Tom Osborne Field, but you can have stadium naming rights.
Don't touch Memorial Stadium's naming rights, in my opinion. I know the money.
No, it's Memorial Stadium, powered or presented by.
It would have to be like Berkshire Hathaway Memorial Stadium, which is just gross. That's gross. That's Memorial Stadium, in my humble opinion.
Well, just go to your friends in the military.
Well, like what do they do in Denver? It used to be Sports Authority Field at Mile High Stadium. Like gross. That's Mile High. What was
the old Astrodome? I mean, they had.
Was I born?
Enron Field.
I'm not sure I was born yet.
What is the Astrodome? It was in Bad News Bears 3 or 2 or whichever one it was.
But I'll say, as long as the sponsorship fits in, I hate some of the soccer jerseys that have like these bright, bold corporate sponsors that don't fit the colors of the jersey. Fit the colors of the jersey, make it look somewhat muted.
It's got to look pretty.
But I don't mind the idea as long as it's, again, as you said, not just plastered everywhere like a NASCAR car. Like,
I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's all good. We'll check in with Coach Barnett. Hour 2, Hail Varsity continues. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. We welcome in the Hall of Fame coach, Gary Barnett, with us, Colorado, Northwestern, Missouri. Coach, that's 3 Hall of Fames. Am I missing any?
I don't have any idea, Chris, but I'm proud to be members of those and have been selected for them, and it's a great honor, and I appreciate it very much. I have no idea what else is out there.
You're not uncomfortable. I should say you're not comfortable with that kind of light shine, are you?
That discussion, no. Let's go somewhere else.
All right. How about Bill Walton? Do you ever spend any time with or interact with Bill Walton?
I did not, but I had a great appreciation for him as a player.
Yeah.
I mean, we were pretty much close to the same age. And, I just remember watching him play in college and was so impressed with how hard he played and, just the intensity that he brought to the game. And so, he was one of my all-time favorite players to watch in college.
All the times he'd do shows or games, rather, with Dave Pasch, he was always smiling, and I just get a kick out of how happy he was and how much better he felt, too, once he finally got things figured out with his medical situation, with just a sad Monday with him passing away. But, man, what a guy to smile about.
I didn't follow the NBA much, but I sure watched in college and had a great appreciation for college athletes at that time. Dave Pasch deserves wings because I think Bill Walton would be really hard to work with. So, Dave Pesch could put up with it. I had a little trouble listening to it. I would rather listen to Mark Johnson, but I sure liked him as a player.
No, he was a different dude for sure. I get it. I absolutely get it. Gary Barnett's with us. Coach, Athlon has put out their anonymous coaches' comments, and the Big Ten was front and center just a couple of days ago. We got into this discussion yesterday with not only Nebraska, but some of the other teams. And what team in the Big Ten has the intrigue for you? If you could just pick one team that you're like, man, I wonder how it's going to be, who is it for this upcoming 2024 season?
Oregon.
Really? Okay. It is Oregon. I think they're going to go kill it. I think they're going to be great.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm eager to watch arguably the best team in the Pac-12 for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Or more. I'm eager to watch how they maneuver the environment and the travel and just the different style of play to some extent. But I think everybody's going to have to adjust to Oregon more than Oregon's going to have to adjust to everybody else. Now, Ohio State may run the same, may be very similar, but I think people are going to have to adjust to Oregon because they just come after you and they assault you. And from all different sides and ways. And so that's the one that's probably I'm most intrigued with.
I look at Oregon's lines of scrimmage. I look at Lanning. I look at Gabriel. Saw him with Oklahoma. Kid's a great quarterback. What do you know about Lanning? Is he kind of a throwback personality or program guy? I mean, he's not been at Oregon long. He was a longtime assistant at Georgia for sure. So, I mean, he's a Kirby guy, but he has brought some SEC to the Pacific Northwest and now maybe to the Big Ten.
Well, Lanning is from Missouri, and he went to William Jewell College up in Liberty, Missouri. And so all the contacts that I've kept during years in the state of Missouri, everybody has just a great deal of respect for him because he sort of came from nowhere. I mean, you come from Liberty Jewell or from William Jewell, you're not out on the fast track. And so he's had to work his way through and through the SEC. That's quite an achievement, and to end up where he is. So a great deal of respect for him. I think he's a little bit old school, but he's also at that age and played, relatively in the near past that he can understand the kids and understand the whole college scene really well. But he also brings defense to a team that that's if you have somebody that can bring that. I mean, offense is great, but someone who can diagnose and look at something right away and know what you have to do to try to slow it down or stop it, I think that's a real quality to have in a head coach in today's world, especially SEC and Big Ten.
Gary Barnett with us. Few minutes. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're talking some of the anonymous comments from Athlon, Coaches Confidential. Nebraska is picked to be a breakthrough team. Coach Barnett, they just aren't sure how big the breakthrough is going to be. They like Rule. They like Tony White in the defense. They like what Nebraska's got from a size and depth on the lines of scrimmage. It's about the freshman quarterback, we presume. But what constitutes a breakthrough for you? Because you've had times in your career where you guys got over the hump. Is it a big breakthrough? Did you consider that Rose Bowl season at Northwestern a huge breakthrough, or even the trip to the Fiesta Bowl in Colorado in 2001? Were those huge breakthroughs, or did you feel it coming? Talk to me about that timeline, and what do you see in Nebraska as a breakthrough?
Well, I'd say that for Northwestern, we knew that we were going to have enough good players and could play well enough to get to a bowl game. We had no idea we were going to crash the ceiling and end up in a Rose Bowl. None. I really didn't. And I mean, we knew we were better. We knew we were going to be good. We knew we'd get to a bowl game, which hadn't happened in 49 years. So to us, we did have a breakthrough, but then it became just a major, major breakthrough because all of a sudden we were relevant everywhere. At Colorado, the first year we went to the Inside Bowl, that was a disappointment. We were a better team than that, but we didn't have the character at the time to do it. And next year we were really young. We lost 26 seniors, but we were disappointed actually in the Fiesta Bowl because we felt like our victory over Nebraska would put us in the national championship game against Miami. And of course, Nebraska got to go play in that. So that was a disappointment for us, but it was, we were good. We were a good team every year. We had some things we had to overcome, but as far as Nebraska goes this year, they haven't been to a bowl game in a long time, and I think you got to look at the chances of being in a bowl game, but not being a 6-6 team or a 7-5 team, but being an 8-win team. I think that's a breakthrough for them.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Last week you had revenue sharing and settlement with the lawsuits, the 3 lawsuits. Coach Barnett, what's the number you have in mind of schools that are going to be able to generate that revenue number of $20 million as we move forward here and finish this process here where it's now okay for universities to pay players?
Chris, I think you're looking at 40, but I think there's another 20 that want to do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether they're going to use private equity. I don't know whether they can manufacture a big enough NIL program to come up with that kind of money. NIL actually now, this whole decision that's happened has strengthened NIL, I think, because first of all, you can't just all of a sudden say, okay, you're going to spend $22 million on student athletes and at the same time lose a certain amount of money each year for the next 10 years automatically from the NCAA. So it's not just 22, it's 22 plus whatever they're taking out of your check for the next 10 years. So I think NIL money is going to go a long way into making up the difference. $22 million. And of course, you got to decide how you're going to spend it, and that's going to be a big controversy. Whether it's going to be Title IX controlled or not. If Title IX controls it, they're going to need NIL big time. If Title IX doesn't control it, maybe not so much, but you're going to need NIL to help those sports that don't get money from the university. So it's a sticky wicket right now, and nobody knows how it's going to end up. And it's going to be a process. I think it's a 2-year process trying to figure out how this thing works because it's so complicated. Are they going to limit the size of teams? If they limit the size of teams, then you're going to need NIL for sure. Are they going to not have scholarships? And if you're going to not have scholarships and have the $22 million cover that, then you're going to need NIL. So I think it's put a real premium on the NIL and the collectives around the country, and a lot of pressure on them too.
Yeah, you got to produce and you got to have that money machine. Do you think walk-ons are endangered? That's been a huge part of the Nebraskas and Wisconsins. And I wanted to ask you how big walk-ons have been in your career.
Well, walk-ons have always been critical, but I never had the numbers that Nebraska had. I mean, our walk-ons, we were limited 20 walk-ons a year because of Title IX. Mm-hmm. No matter whether the kid's on scholarship or not, you have to have an equivalent number of female athletes participating to equal the walk-ons as well. And traditionally, women's sports have not had a lot of walk-ons. So it was we would have had 25, 30, 35 kids that wanted to walk on, but because of Title IX restrictions, we were cut down to a minimum of 20 or a maximum of 20. So, Nebraska has a lot of other sports than Colorado has. And so that's how you could offset those numbers. We couldn't offset those numbers. I don't know whether people are going to be able to offset those numbers or not. I think walk-ons to keep at 85 or up to 100 are going to possibly survive, but over 100, I don't know that they're going to survive unless there's just huge. Well, it all comes down to how they rule the Title IX situation on this $22 million.
Gary Barnett with us, Coach. We'll get you out. A couple of more thoughts on Big Ten teams. What's your prediction with the Iowa's offensive situation? Are they better this year? And can Iowa be a challenger in this new Big Ten? I also am interested with Wisconsin, and it was kind of a square peg round hole personnel-wise with this air raid look that Fickell had. I think Wisconsin's defense will be pretty darn good again, but can a year two be smoother? Two teams, two offenses from the Old West. What do you anticipate with both these teams?
Well, I think with Wisconsin that you're right, but that there was it wasn't a good combination at the time, but over time it will be. And the second year is usually the hardest, but that's in the days when you can't replace players. Now you can replace players, so the second year doesn't mean that much anymore. Before, when you'd come in as a coach, take over, you were stuck with those players until they graduated, till finished. And so you had you had 3/4 of your team that were recruited by somebody else, and a quarter of your team recruited by you. The second year, it's 50-50. That's a locker room issue. But now you don't have that situation. Now you can move kids out right away, and you can have more of your guys early. So I think that transition is going to take place faster. Iowa, I don't know, Chris. I got a call from a sports writer that wanted me to anonymously say what should happen at Iowa, what the offense should do. And I sent him a note and said, first of all, that's not my thing. And no, I don't want to talk about it. So, I have great respect for Kirk Ferentz. What's he going to do? I don't know. But he's been there a long time, and he's won a lot of games. And I'm just I'm more eager to see what he does this year. And maybe he won't do anything, but I'll bet he wins a bunch of games.
I'm with you. I think they get it figured out. And if McNamara stays healthy, I think they'll be dangerous. I think they're being slept on a little bit, and it wasn't just one guy that was a problem. I think you need to be willing to loosen up a little bit because the other two phases have been so good for so long. Coach, I want you to have a good weekend, and we'll run you down again. Thanks for taking some time today.
Okay, Chris, great being with you.
Good to spend time with the head coach, a longtime head coach at Northwestern in Colorado, Gary Barnett. His take on the anonymous coaching comments in Athlon, big on the Big Red, his takeaways with Nebraska. Reminder to get buckled up, hands on the wheel, eyes and focus straight ahead. The driver has one job to drive. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. We'll switch gears, get to some baseball thoughts. The road to Stillwater. As part of the Nebraska baseball broadcast, David Gustafson, old Gus, Hail Varsity alumni, on the way to Stillwater. We'll check in with Gus next on Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in part of the Husker baseball broadcast, alum of Hail Varsity Radio, David Gustafson, back with us. Gus, you got the bags all packed, the road to Stillwater, over, under on bathroom stops, my friend.
Well, it's a 6-hour drive for me, so it's a good 3. Let's put it that way, Schmitty. Could be more. Depends on how much, how many drinks you have on the way down. If you have to get an extra coffee or a pop or, that sort of thing. So You never know. I'm going to go three. Let's go over 3.5. Let's probably push the over. So.
There's no Dumb and Dumber reenactment. You will stop.
We will stop. Absolutely. Yes. We won't take that chance, by no means.
It's a cardigan. Thank you. David Gustafson's with us. What did you think of the run in Omaha?
Well, I thought the run in Omaha was really incredible, just the way it started. You know, with the Tuesday game where things got out of hand early, that's such a long road ahead of you, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, for them to come back and win this thing, it's 5 games. Can they find the pitching? Do they have enough to get to Sunday? And then at Sundays, where do you go? Well, I mean, Sears was great. You go to McConaughey. Will Walsh, what a phenomenal performance from Will Walsh. And it just continued to go. And they got back to Brockett on Sunday. And it continued to be one of those where once they started rolling, it was kind of fun to watch, especially obviously offensively. But for me, the pitching was great to watch too because they were controlling the game. And it was just really fun to watch. And then offensively, what a week that they put together after that first day. You know, that first day was pretty tough to watch, but they got it together and started swinging some hot bats. Hopefully, can carry it in here this weekend.
It's been pretty fascinating to see this team grow, and Coach Bolt's talked a lot about where they're at right now. Time will tell if they're peaking at the right time. It's a tough opener against Florida. We'll get your synopsis on the Gators in a moment, but when you talk about Karen Swanson, his recent run, and really just how he's finishing the year. Let's focus on Swanee, Gus. And a year ago, 18 bombs, scuffled sometimes this season, but man, really put it together in some key moments.
You know, I really think it was, just an incredible week for him. Yeah, yes, the big hit in the 9th inning on Sunday was phenomenal to watch, and just the electric atmosphere that it created. But, it goes back to me where it was the 12-pitch at bat on the Wednesday game where that thing is where really his week started. It started for the offense after that as well. His at-bat was just huge. It was so key that it propelled everybody else to get going, and once they did, it was steamrollers. That offense was clicking. And granted, it wasn't every single inning, but boy, it felt like it for a few days that it was every single inning that they were threatening.
They were. They did better with runners in scoring position, close to 260 for the Big Ten tournament. Gus, you've seen a ton of Big Ten baseball this season, and you know how deep and talented the catching pool is. But and Will Bolt talked about Karen being snubbed a bit. He flexed quite literally many times in the Big Ten tournament. Do you think he can carry on this torrid pace? I mean, 6 bombs is a ton to ask, but what do you look forward from Karen and some of the offensive leaders this weekend?
Well, I think Karen, yes, he can continue, maybe not with that much production, but he certainly, has the capability to have another big weekend with him, in him, and so does a lot of guys down. He continue to go down. He goes back to the term, yeah, Karen stole the show. Swanson was the next guy, right? But there was solid contact from Red Stokes all weekend and also from Joshua Overbeek. So, and this lineup has the potential to where you can find some pretty decent pop in every single spot in that lineup at times. So I'm excited to see what they can do at this ballpark. I've never personally been there, but I've heard it's a little bit more offensive. Now, granted, you're going to face some good pitching teams, obviously, but I'm excited to see what the offense can do because typically it does play a little bit more offensive than it does defensively.
Gus, we know that Florida got in by the rep and league they're in. They're a good club, 7-8 against national seeds this season out of the SEC. Their pitching is not their strength, but it's offense. It's same with Oklahoma State. Those are the two things. What do you like about Nebraska's pitching versus both of these teams potentially and their offense? Can good pitching do the job this weekend against good hitting?
Well, I've always said that, especially when you get to tournament play, conference tournament's one thing, but when you get into regional type of play, it is the pitching that takes over for everything, and that usually controls about, personally 75% of the games I've seen in the regional games have really been whoever can get the pitching solid start and a solid bullpen usually can come out on top of that, and that kind of carries over into the supers and usually into the College World Series as well. So I do believe that good pitching can beat good offense, especially in regional play, because remember, you're facing the teams that, one, have qualified, but two, always have a legitimate Friday night. They may have a legitimate Saturday night guy as well, and a lot of these teams that are in this regional do have solid 1, 2, and even 3s.
Where do you think Nebraska's at with that third spot? Have you seen enough recently with the Walshes, Christos, and Brockett's to give Nebraska the pitching advantage when it comes to this field? Yes,
on paper, it can be that way, absolutely. And, obviously you're going to see Fears, then you're going to see McConaughey, and I'm not sure who the third one will be, but you do have now, I think, legitimately 3, 4 true starters, and Drew Crystal can be a starter as well, but they kind of like him, and he's looked really good out of the bullpen here of late, where he can extend it 2, 3 innings, and he's come in and had all kinds of success with it, and you kind of need one of those guys in that bullpen at times that can eat up a couple of innings, 3 if he has to, even 4 maybe, be extended and be really successful and dominant, and that's what he's done lately. So it's a solid staff, and that's not even – those are your starters, and, of course, Krista, it has been both, but that's not even talking about the bullpen. I mean, the starting rotation can be great here this weekend, and if they can do that, they should see some success.
Couple more minutes. David Gustafson with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Remember Gus for his time with Hail Varsity. Of course, you've heard him with the Nebraska baseball broadcast on the road to Stillwater. You hear the car beeping as Gus is all packed up and ready to go. So what's your take on Florida, their nod, getting the nod in, and what scares you about the Gators?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, yes, they, record-wise, didn't have the best year for what you would expect out of a Florida Gator team, but it's a team that knows how to win. I mean, they're perennial at the College World Series. They always have a success in the SEC, except for this year. They didn't have a great conference record. But you mentioned before the success that they've had against top national seeds this year. And so that worries you because you know that they're battle tested. You know they've seen some of the best arms, the best hitters in the country. And so that's what worries me a little bit is they're really tested. Yeah, the record doesn't show it necessarily, but when you're playing in that tough of a league, it is tough to get wins sometimes, tough to win series. But you can be a very good baseball team, and Florida's a little scary because they can pitch it and they can hit it. And so it'll be a tough test here tomorrow afternoon, but I think you got the right guy on the mound for sure to try to deal with the Gators.
Elijah mentioned this yesterday. We were talking with Evan Bland. I want to get your perspective on Nebraska's diversity on offense. They can swipe bags. They can hit for power. They can string together some hits. It happens quite a bit, while Oklahoma State, Florida may tend to rely on the big 3-run shot, right? Can Nebraska's style serve them well this weekend? Do you like that ability?
Yeah, I do, because some teams can't do it, and some teams have to rely on a big inning or a big shot, where Nebraska can get a guy on, move him over, and then execute and find a way to bring him home. Some teams can't. They're not built that way. And Nebraska has enough diversity in that lineup. 1 through 9 can move a guy if they need to. Yeah, you got a little speed mixed in there as well with Riley Silva, who can really run, and Joshua Overbeek really is a good base runner as well. They'll swipe a bag. So I like how they can be very versatile. Yes, can Nebraska put together a big inning with the long ball? Yeah, well, you saw it on Saturday, that morning game. It wasn't much offense, but it was Karen with a 3-run bomb, and that still maybe hasn't landed, and the other one's still following it. So they can have the big hits, but I really do like the way that they can build an inning and manufacture if they have to.
What a wind down with the mental toughness part. What have you seen from this team, and what coaching have you gleaned from Will Bolt and Rob Childress? How are their fingerprints on this squad, and what do you believe could help make this really special? 19 games over 500, nothing to shake your head at all. But it's been some steps forward and a step back, it seems like, from time to time.
I think it's the mental toughness part that they get from Will Bolt. I mean, his team plays just like he played. Rob Childress, the same kind of mentality, preparing his pitchers. So it's mental toughness. How can you overcome adversity within the game, but especially move on if you were to drop a game? I mean, that's tough adversity they were facing in the Big Ten tournament. Just think about it. I mean, you dropped the first game 15-2, and you got a lot of people out there that are saying, count them out, but those guys are tough. They're mentally tough. They're always going to battle. They're going to grind every single day. It doesn't matter if they don't have success at one point. They're going to come back and give it their all. That's all you can ask a team to do. So I think their best thing is that they are so mentally tough and prepared that that's one of the reasons that they have had so much success this year, just because you got to find a way to overcome it, and this team does time and time again.
David Gustafson with us, part of Husker Baseball, Hail Varsity Radio. Gus, we need an update on Columbus, the M's. How is baseball, how is travel ball going for you guys?
Well, it's been a little slow. We've had some rainouts. You know how that fun stuff is, where you get games canceled, all that kind of fun stuff. But they're playing all right. They're playing pretty well. Got a few games in last night finally. But that season's another month, and that'll be done too. So time's flying by here this spring, but they're doing all right. Well,
love to hear it. I know you're a busy dude coaching and doing ball games, and always love catching up and spending the few minutes, safe time down in Stillwater, and we'll talk again. Thanks, Gus.
Yeah, thanks, Schmidt. We'll see you.
Good to hear from David Gustafson, part of the Husker Radio Network, headed to Stillwater, Nebraska, Okie State, as the Tarp's on the field. Saw a tweet from our friend Evan Bland. He is down there, and Tarp is on the field. Hopefully baseball tomorrow at 2, and things don't get pushed back too much. But good stuff from Gus. I know an objection from Elijah on the over on 3.5 bathroom stops on a 6-hour trip. We'll see what Danny Burke, Pride of Chicago, thinks of that next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We say hi to Danny Burke, burksbeat.com. Gambling info and thoughts from the Pride of Chicago at Danny Burke 5. Burke's Best Bets. I want to give a quick shout-out to Broderick, who is very loyal. We appreciate you, Broderick, from West Texas, making his way back to Lincoln from Mexico. Had to stop for storms. We are giving you that shout-out, Broderick, as he listens every day. And we thank you so much. Couldn't get into the stream, so he's in and checking things out, presumably on one of the apps or Twitter. So safe travels, Broderick. Thank you. Daddy, over/under on if Elijah would get stopped at the border.
Ooh.
Sorry, you got the beard and you're young.
He's got to be at least like minus 350 to get pulled over, and it depends how many times he's going for the over/under. But I think it would be a heavy favorite that would be the case.
I will say my vehicle has some. I bought it from a state auto auction.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to
some secret compartments.
No, you've seen my car before. It has not where I was going. I was going to say it has
Elijah the Mule.
Some faded state of Nebraska stickers on there, where the state of Nebraska sticker was on there, and I think it's helped me at times where it's a state of Nebraska car. I'm not going to pull over the state of Nebraska car, but it's not. It's just you can kind of see the faint outlines from where the stickers were from their sun faded. I'm more concerned about people trying to flip me off in traffic now. That stupid guy from the radio, that must be his car. It's got faded state of Nebraska stickers on there.
They'll give you both birds. It's okay.
Not the first.
You're loved.
Not the last.
Daddy, I want to get your reaction. Nebraska in primetime games. They are going to be under the lights for Iowa. They'll be under the lights for Colorado. As you look at Nebraska, as they're getting to be more of that really, really trendy jump on their bandwagon team with some of the national talking heads, how do you view that? How do you look at it when you examine Nebraska, not only the over-under totals that are out there, but also some of the early lines that are out there?
Yeah, look, I mean, I still think, and you guys know this very well, that they're a ways away from really being in the mainstream media consistently to where they're going to be getting that respect on the week-to-week basis. And I say that now, right, heading into the preseason, because a lot of the talk is just the merging of these conferences and a lot of teams that have already established themselves. And Nebraska, while they have been in the limelight for so long, they simultaneously have disappointed for the past decade to where people aren't going to believe it until they see it. And I do think it's only going to take a handful of games, and you're going to see the stardom that's been put in Lincoln. And obviously the Big Ten is going to have more draw because of the merging of the conferences in the first place. So then it's really going to take probably, again, like a handful of games until the Cornhuskers, start to get a lot more of that recognition that they rightfully will end up deserving by the end of the season. Because last year, while yes, there were still a lot of disappointing facets of that season, you understand that it's a rebuild. You understand that was the first year under head coach Matt Rule, and now they've brought in a hopeful star quarterback, and we have seen what traditionally now Matt Rule has done in year number 2. And let's be honest, it's a pretty favorable schedule, guys. And I know that Nebraska is going to have that Colorado game circled on their calendar if they don't already. I know all the fans are looking for it. Heck, I think everybody who isn't a Colorado fan is looking for this Colorado squad to get their butts kicked every single week because of what they've been putting out on social media. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like we say this every year with the occasional pessimistic attitude, but this year there should be optimism and there will be national discussion about what the ceiling is for this team not too far deep into the year.
Does this team, if they get off to a hot start now with primetime opportunities, national television opportunities, Danny, do you think if the start is what Husker fans think it can be, which is a big if because it hasn't been there in recent years despite what Husker fans have thought, does this team get national buzz, do you think? Do you think your friends in Chicago will start talking about Nebraska?
I think they will. Look, they talk about it now because they like to laugh at me and my buddies who went to Nebraska and were here in Chicago. So it's usually just they're tormenting us. And some try to hop on the bandwagon when we're rooting for them going crazy. And they know we get, a little bit of a rough time there as football fans. So once they get good, yes, I do think there will be a lot of excitement around it because it brings back the nostalgia, especially for the older crowd from the 90s. As Schmidt and everybody there in Lincoln very well know more than
the older crowd.
You try to stay flat. I mean, it's older than
young
Elijah
knuckleheads,
myself, right?
So,
but look, I mean, obviously, you got the Big Ten headquarters here in Chicago. It's just this conference been waiting for Nebraska to explode ever since they joined over 10 years ago. And this is a perfect opportunity to do so. And again, the attention is going to be to the emergence of the West Coast teams, but Nebraska is going to be slipping in there with those first 7 games until they see Ohio State, a beautiful path to get things started on an incredibly high note. And Nebraska is going to get a lot of attention. Heck, the things that Matt Rule's already been doing in general, getting the big name hire, draws that publicity. So, yeah, it seems inevitable, let's be honest.
So do they, Feldman on Hurd yesterday is like, dude, they're a dark horse for Indy. Are you willing to go there as a futures bet about Nebraska and Indy? I'd assume you could get incredible payoff odds for it.
Yeah, I haven't looked lately. Honestly, the way I would rather handicap it is just with their win total to be a little bit more safe with it, right? Sure. Because the structure of this conference and how it's going to be new and then getting more talented team in there, it just really makes it difficult. Look, if you're throwing a little pizza money on it, I get it. I could understand the intrigue there. But you're better off waiting until you get to that spot so you have an idea of what this Nebraska team is. How do they fare in Columbus against Ohio State? Probably not going to be going too well. But at that point, once potentially if they go in there undefeated, all right, you're going to get better odds. All right, then you have UCLA, you have USC. These are going to be tough opponents. Wisconsin, Iowa, even though I still think they're going to have a good edge over both of those squads, realistically heading into those last 2 games, you're going to get better odds than what you have now because of the tough road that they have with that Ohio State and then UCLA and USC spot. So I think you're better off waiting right now because you get the understanding and you're going to get a better price. So just look for the win total because they should get over what their mark is for this season.
So, Danny, everything I'm hearing you say right there is, if I'm reading in between the lines here correctly, you're saying don't bet Nebraska to make Indy, bet them to make the college football playoff? Yeah?
Wow.
Hey, those are your words, not mine. No, look, it's Ohio State or nothing, obviously, with this conference, and then a big question mark with some of these other teams. And obviously, you still have the top of the class throughout the rest of the country. This is just going to be a year with the realistic expectations for Nebraska to at least be in the hunt and to overcome those 50-50 spots and to show competency when the game is coming down to the wire, which should be expected out of this crew, and they know that's what should be expected. So as long as that's coming to fruition and they're at least in the hunt, so to speak, toward the end in terms of competition with this conference, that should satisfy Husker Nation, because I think after all this time, the fan base has really tempered those expectations while still staying optimistic, but realizing what the true ceiling is.
It's Danny Burke, burksbeat.com. Check out his site. Check out his podcast. Danny, we didn't intentionally plan to spend this entire segment on Nebraska. Eat Beef is wondering about Michigan. I know you'll do a pod at a projection here closer to the season on just how the Big Ten will shake out. Can I get 2 minutes on the other side for the Mavs and Wolves tonight and some NHL from you?
Yeah, you got it. No problem.
All right. Danny Burke, burksbeat.com. Log on, check out his site, his podcast. More with the Pride of Chicago next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
burksbeat.com. That's the website, and the podcast with Danny Burke at Danny Burke 5. Follow him on Twitter. Mavs and Minnesota. Does Minnesota have one more in him? I know they're favored 4.5. Danny, what do you feel?
I think they pull this one out, but I'm pretty timid in terms of laying 4 in the hook for the entirety of this game. We've seen them, obviously, in the 3 games they've lost, blown these leads late. And 4.5 is kind of getting a little too big on the side of the Timberwolves. Yes, that's factored in with the expectation. They have the momentum. They're going to bounce back. But Dallas is still Dallas, and it's so hard to limit Luka Doncic at the end of these games because you're playing so tight. Even if you contest him closely, he's magnificent at drawing the fouls. And then you have the other option with Kyrie Irving. Gafford's emerging down low. Derrick Jones Jr. can hit the triples. Long story short, 4.5 makes me uncomfortable, but I do think Minnesota wins this game outright. The play that I'm making here, fellas, is the first half spread with Minnesota -2 in the hook. Now, in both of those first games at home, they won the first one by 3 at the end of the first half. The next one was by 12, and then the next 2 they pushed, and then they got walloped, I believe is what it was in game 3. So they're +13 in terms of the first half margin at home. That doesn't mean you blindly bet it per se in this spot, but it doesn't hurt having that behind you, looking to lean on some of that justification. It's really because they're carrying over that momentum. Minnesota, if they can hit their triples early on, you know their defense is going to step up. And traditionally in this series, in the second half of these games is when we've seen Dallas power through. So that's why I think if you have a lot of conviction in Minnesota, target them in the first half of this game. Again, don't look at the money line. It's pretty expensive, like -180, so that's why I targeted -2 in the hook at the odds of -105.
It's Danny Burke with us here, Burke's Best Bets. Any look at the total? You wonder if in a game like this,
200?
Minnesota's been known for their defense. Dallas has been known for the defense, but that number seems a little bit low to me even despite that. Do you look at the total at all?
Yeah, you know, it was funny. I mean, last series with Minnesota, we were really getting a good bargain with them against the Nuggets. I know I talked about it with you guys. It was even lower because I think for this game is like 209.5. We were seeing it like 200, 204, I think is what we saw last series, and it would find its way over in a majority of the games. Like we've seen in this series, except for last game, I don't want to touch it because, yes, elimination, you tend to see these games played more tightly. I think you're going to have either a slow second or third quarter. And if that's the case, if you do like this total to go over, I think you should just wait and inevitably get that better number that's going to come down and be adjusted maybe to that 200 spot. Because of all those late game fouls, you're going to get the time to stop, a lot of free throw opportunities, and probably get over that adjusted number. But no thoughts with it at this pre-flop spot around that 209.5 spot right now.
If I've learned anything from our years of talking to Danny Burke, it's that if you don't like a number pregame, wait for it in-game, then bet it in-game. Danny, is that usually sound advice if you're a little scared about a number pregame?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, it goes to be a good practice with a lot of these sports. You don't have to bet everything before the game starts. A lot of these bettors only look at these live betting opportunities because you can beat the number, you can beat the algorithm, you understand what the tempo of the game is looking like, and if someone's in foul trouble, and what teams usually do in the third and fourth quarter. And eventually these books will catch on, but sometimes you are going to have a better idea. Whereas if you're pre-flop with it, you don't have all of the conviction in the world, you're going in blind. So why not just wait? And a lot of times you are going to get that better number, help yourself out, or you go, you know what, I was wrong. Thankfully I didn't touch it before it started. Now I'm just going to stay away. So that's why a lot of times it's better to practice patience. And a lot of these, especially prime time spots where all the eyes are glued to the screen.
Danny, you got to circle a game you're coming back, all right?
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, my friends.
It's Danny Burke, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, back tomorrow at 4. Thanks.